He did promise to eradicate child poverty in the UK during his term of office, and he hasn't managed to do that. He was going to bring peace and security to Iraq. I think that's not happened yet. He's going to sort out a peace process in the Middle East. A little bit more work to be done on that, perhaps. But now he's got a free Tuesday afternoon every other week to deal with global warming. So maybe we should have a bit more faith that this might work. And some people would say, surely with the immensity of this problem, our leaders will respond to humanity's cries that something needs to be done about global warming. Well, I would compare this with the universal revulsion in opposition to two other global social problems that, by coincidence, Glenn mentioned earlier on, that we can't demarcate from global warming: war and global poverty. I don't have time or space to go into these subjects in any detail. Suffice to say that Sir Nicholas Stern, when he said climate change was the biggest example of market failure, well, I'd be inclined to disagree with that. The fact that we have global poverty, 30,000 people starving to death every day, apparently, that strikes me as being a bit of a market failure and probably will dwarf the impact of global warming in years to come. But of course that doesn't register on the market system. Do they say, well, the market isn't working in Africa, there's no market there, so it's nothing to do with us? I think our charge would be that the market system claims to be the most efficient means of matching supply with demand. We would say then it's clearly failing the starving and the malnourished of the world. Capitalism gives us many things. It creates new markets every day, not just carbon offsetting, but markets in derivatives, futures, hedge funds. Don't ask me about this, I don't know what they actually mean. But they create these sort of virtual markets. While there's no actually markets for people like this, the famous Kevin Carter picture from the Sudan 20 years ago. So the track record for capitalism on global issues is not a good one. They haven't dealt with war, and they haven't dealt with global poverty. Should we really have confidence that we're going to be able to deal with global warming? Now, it's at this stage that I was going to come on to talk about socialism, and it's 12 minutes to 5.
Yeah, 12 minutes to 4.
Is that not?
It's 4.
Is it 4?
Yeah, 12 minutes to 4. Yeah.
So we have got an hour on top of this.
We've got now, yeah.
Right, that's fine. I was going to say, I want 12 minutes of discussion at least. So I'll come on to socialism bit then. That's good. Right. Yeah, so just to finish off on that point, first of all, it's tempting to get carried away with the sort of compelling global warming storyline, an unknown danger lurking somewhere in the future, supposedly. But I think it's also easy to oversee that today, in a relatively stable climate, or over the last few decades in a relatively stable climate, millions of people have died needlessly from hunger in a world that could actually feed them. So let's maybe keep things in some sort of perspective. Probably global warming is not an issue for a large minority of the population of the world whose expected lifetime is maybe 30 or 40 years. But it's not a competition. We're not trying to rank what's the most important issue or not. What we're trying to do is actually put things into perspective. From a socialist point of view, actually try and see the common links between these social problems, that you can't really deal with one and ignore the others. Okay, so what could socialism do? So to summarise so far, the SPGB doesn't like capitalism very much. Hopefully you've got that message. But that's the easy bit, criticising a system. And the question is asked, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to put in its place? And the first response that I should say to that question, that question I ask myself, is the socialists won't really be doing anything. It won't be up to us. It won't be up to the SPGB. It won't be up to me and the chairman sitting in a hall in Holborn dictating what socialism is going to be like. Socialism must be the collective effort of a politically aware majority of humanity. And as long as you don't get away from that starting point, then a lot of other things hopefully slot in. So what might socialism be like, and would it be able to meet the challenge of global warming? One of the things I was wanting to do in this talk, I decided just to drop it earlier on just because of time reasons, was to, I did mention actually in part, contrasting the problem of global warming and how we got into that problem, contrasting that with the lifeline that scientists have up to a point given us in terms of understanding of the problem, this lifeline they've given us over a very, very short period of time. And that's a scientific approach. And socialists try at least to use a similar approach if we can, by which I mean a systematic approach, a thorough approach, primarily trying to identify the level at which a problem lies, to get down to the right explanatory level. That's what the scientists, the physical scientists have done with global warming. So when you might be an oceanographer looking at corals for your own interest for years and years, and understanding the processes and how they get bleached by acids and such like, and then when an atmospheric scientist comes along to you and says, by the way, increased CO2 dissolution into the oceans, what's that going to do to the corals? You're able to answer them because you've actually got down to the right level of understanding of the physical world. And I guess what we would say is we should be doing that same sort of thing in terms of our understanding of the political world or the economic world, getting down to the right explanatory level. Because what you do find is when you get down to the right explanatory level, you identify what things are wrong. It doesn't just answer one problem like global warming, it does start to answer a whole host of other social problems as well. Because it can be daunting when you hear the socialist case at first. You think, my goodness, that sounds pretty daunting. But bear in mind just what the potential is, what power it actually will give us, that level of understanding. So what actually is the socialist case then? We would argue that the problem doesn't lie at the level of the individual consumer, but it lies in the nature of society, and specifically how we organise production and distribution of wealth. We'd argue that the real motor behind production is the drive for profit. It's not to satisfy human needs, though that may often occur as a byproduct. The real function, the real drive is production for sale in the market with a view to making a profit. And why is this necessary? Because the profit is retained by the owners of the means of producing that wealth, and it's retained by them with the result that they can be rich without actually having to do any work themselves. A bit like Glenn's industrialist talking to the fishermen. But in order to break that cycle, production for profit, sold on a market, profit realised, profit taken by a minority, profit invested to employ more people, to make more stuff, to realise a profit and so on. In order to break that cycle, you have to challenge a whole host of things. You have to get down to a certain fundamental level. You have to challenge not just waste and pollution. You can't just pick on Bush or Ryanair or EasyJet. See, it's bad when your laptop goes to sleep. Tell you something. You can't just challenge these things. You have to look a bit deeper. You have to remove production for profit.